Finally, the Himalayan. And I'll be very honest with you, I was a little disappointed to not have ridden it in the Himalayas where I wanted to, but what the hell, I have the motorcycle with me here at the sea level, and while everyone else has talked about it in the Himalayas where the performance was apparently slightly compromised, this motorcycle here at the sea level should perform at its best. And I rode it to my heart's content yesterday, about 300 odd kilometers, and I really must say I have come away impressed. Now, I'm not going to talk about the changes that this motorcycle has received over its predecessor because you've already heard enough of it. I'll talk about all that I experienced over my journey yesterday. And I went to an area where there were like 4 or 5 different peaks, and I just point and shot at those peaks. In fact, I also had this small encounter with a leopard. I just saw it and I turned back and I ran away. There were some wild boars, peacocks, and it was an amazing experience. This motorcycle felt indestructible. There were a lot of findings and I'm going to share all of those with you. So all of you who are willing to buy this motorcycle need to watch this video end to end. First things first, I'm going to answer some questions that you guys would probably have. So is it a good city bike? First and foremost, in hot conditions, when I was riding through Goa traffic, and trust me, Goa can be compared to a lot of other metros these days where you have a lot of traffic now, stop-start traffic. In hot conditions, the engine can get hot and you can feel the heat radiating from the engine, especially on the right hand side, and your calf can feel hot if not roasted. This motorcycle needs to stretch its legs, it needs to see some air flowing through it, and that's when you don't feel any heat. But in stop-start traffic conditions, especially in hot conditions, you will definitely feel some heat radiating from the engine. So that's one. Apart from that, in stop-start conditions, the tractability is just about sufficient. There is no problem as such. You can ride this motorcycle within the city, but heat is something that a lot of you are concerned about when you're riding in hot conditions, in stop-start conditions. So you need to be wary of that. Apart from that, the clutch is light. The gear shifts for the most part are slick. I must tell you that the motorcycle that I had for test the day before yesterday had service overdue for about 800-900 kilometers. So that motorcycle's gearbox felt a little bit notchy. This motorcycle is fine and the gearbox here is fine. So if you change the engine oil in a timely fashion, it should not be a problem. Another important thing is the clutch action and the brake lever action, and it's all very light and usable. There is no problem whatsoever. For those of you who are not very tall, you would be well off opting with the 805 mm seat, the lower version. And if you are 5 feet 5, you should be fine. I am 5 feet 10 and I did not have any problem whatsoever with the standard seat as well. As you can see, I can sit here, and with the 825 mm seat also, I can very easily almost touch my heels down. So while the seat height is pretty high, it's quite narrow, it's very narrow, and it allows you to straighten your legs without you having to open your groin, and that really means that even the shorter ones amongst you should be able to extend their legs onto the ground more than what you would imagine. So even for those of you who want to go with the 845 mm top of the line plus 20 mm seat, it should not be a problem. It's essentially meant for slightly taller riders but should not be a problem. So for city, if you're very short, it can be a bit of a problem, but for most part, it's a good city bike. Just be mindful of the heat. The seat is very comfortable. As you can see, it's a very long seat, so you can move yourself forward or backwards without any problem. As you can see, there's a very beautiful knee recess here. So even for the taller ones amongst you, it would not be a problem. 5 feet 10 inch is not exactly short, and as you can see, there is sufficient space between the recess and my knee, and you can move a little bit backward and there is enough space. Now, one very interesting thing that I noticed about this knee recess is that while you're straddling the motorcycle, you can actually rest your thighs on this and stretch yourself out while you are straddling it. So that really means that it really is a comfortable position straddling it. So if you feel cramped, you can really stand and use this as a leverage to stretch yourself back, and that really is something which can help you relax for a little bit. It's not something that many people will tell you, but when you use the tank for that purpose, it really comes across as a very useful feature. About the highway, now let me start off by telling you the gear speeds. And in the first gear, this will reach 55, in the second 83, in the third 105, in the fourth 130 kilometers per hour, in the fifth 145, and the top speedo indicated speed is 160 kilometers per hour, which is fantastic for this kind of a motorcycle. This is 196 kgs, nudging 200. And the performance here is really good. It's a fantastic highway machine. When I was riding this motorcycle, I really thought that this is more of a street bike than an off-roader, because I was constantly comparing it with the old Himalayan. And I'll come to the off-roading part. I really think that the old Himalayan had a lot more torque flowing through it at the lower range, but how different it is from the older Himalayan and how good it is off the road, I'll come to that part. But on the highway, this motorcycle feels impeccable. Now, the good part about this is that for the highway, the torque starts flowing it at a rather low level, and from 2500 rpm onwards you have sufficient torque to keep it going. Now in terms of tractability, I tested it for its low speed, higher gears tractability, and in the 6th gear this motorcycle will start moving on from 45 kilometers per hour. If you have a pillion on, you would have a knock free movement from 50 kilometers per hour. In the 5th gear it will start moving from 40 kilometers per hour. In the 4th gear you'll have movement from as low as 35 kilometers per hour, and in the 3rd gear from 25 kilometers per hour this motorcycle get a move on. I was riding through the streets of Goa, and initially I had some doubts about how good it is, especially as compared to the old Himalayan, because when I was riding it between 2 and 2,500 rpm, where I really thought that it should have enough torque, there was a bit of knocking. But those doubts slowly melted away when I took my focus away from what it should be to what it really is. So definitely it's a slightly heavier engine, and you really have to set aside all the perceptions that you had about, and you really have to set aside all the expectations that you have, especially when you're comparing it with the old Himalayan. It's a new motorcycle, it's a liquid cooled engine, it's heavier, it produces its peak power at 8000 rpm. So the idling as well as the low end torque has shifted a little bit, and you really have to get used to it. But once you get used to it, it's pretty tractable. There is no problem whatsoever. Having said that, the engine gets a very smooth move on only after 3000 revs. From 5000 rpm onwards you really get slight kick, although it's a very progressive engine, but at 5000 rpm you can really feel the mid-range kicking in, and the limiter cuts in at 8700 rpm. So all in all, on the highway this motorcycle really feels like it can go on all day long. If you want to cruise at 100 kilometers per hour, in the 6th gear you'll see 5000 clicks on the tachometer, and 120 130 is very easily manageable. There is no problem whatsoever. It's also one of the most refined Royal Enfield motorcycles you'll find. There are some vibes, I won't say there are no vibes, but Royal Enfield have made sure that this is one of the most refined engines that they have. And if you have a look at the foot peg, you'll see that these rubbers are soft, so they absorb a lot of vibration. Plus there are distinct mounts with rubber bushings, so they isolate the foot pegs from the vibrations from the engine. There are hardly any vibrations on the handlebar and the seat. Also there are some really minor vibrations that come in, but you can totally disregard them. It's a pretty refined motorcycle. So what I'm trying to say here is that if you're on the highway, if you want to go for the long haul for 300 400 500 kilometers, this motorcycle is perfectly capable of that. And since the seat is very long, you can keep changing your position. The riding position also, although of course since it's an upright motorcycle, the handlebar is rather upright, but overall it's a very comfortable triangle. And while initially I had my doubts whether with my leanings towards slightly committed riding stance would it cause trouble to my back, but it did not, and I rode all day without any problem whatsoever. So long story short, if you want to use this motorcycle as purely a highway cruiser, this is completely capable of that. You also have this stay here, and the payload here is 5 kg, but you definitely, I think, can load more, should not be a problem at all. And for the Pillion, the seat is one of the best out there. We had it tested with one of our colleagues who is about 6 feet, and he sat here, and according to him, it's one of the most comfortable seats that he has sat on. Not just the length of it, you have sufficient length to separate two very well-built adults as a rider and a pillion, and the pillion triangle also is pretty sorted, so you don't really have any problem. Even if you're, the position of the foot pegs also for the pillion is very well set for him to sit here for long distances. I really think that the grab rail also has been positioned very well. So for two-up riding also, not just from the seat comfort and the rider and pillion position perspective, but also from the fact that the suspension is pretty sturdy, it doesn't bottom down, and it doesn't take away the dynamic ability of the motorcycle while you're riding it. So even if you're on the road or off the road, you can ride this motorcycle with a pillion, and that really is such a great thing to say about a motorcycle, because in most cases, especially for motorcycles which are not in the premium end, you'll see the suspension bottoming out, and that does not happen here. So fantastic motorcycle for long distance touring. If you want a motorcycle which can travel long distances, I really think that this motorcycle lends itself very well for highway cruising. No problems there. Now coming to the all important off-roading aspect of the motorcycle, I went to an area where there were 4 or 5 hills, and I wanted to create my own path while climbing, and every time the motorcycle did not reach the summit, even if I had to traverse the mountain to achieve that, if the motorcycle did not do it, then probably it was a point taken away from it, because I did not choose very high or very steep hills for this test. And as I had assumed, this motorcycle managed to climb all 3-4 hills without any problem. And I had my chesty on me with the GoPro, so you'd be able to see the footage on the screen right now. I did not have my videographer with me, so I could not have a third person's view, but I can tell you that some ledges were pretty steep, and also while coming down there were some sections where there were some really steep downhill slopes. But thankfully there was enough traction because the monsoons are over, and since there was sufficient grip, there was no problem whatsoever for this motorcycle to make its way. The ground clearance is more than sufficient. The suspension never bottomed out, and even on some of the ledges where I thought that the bash plate and the header pipe protection can hit the stone, it never happened. So for all practical purposes, if you're going off-roading this motorcycle, unless you are one of those extremists who wants to be going trial style, I think this motorcycle can take some of the most extreme off-roading in its stride. The weight is a bit of an issue for those who are not very heftily built, and if you're someone who's skinny, someone who's traveling all alone, and if you're traversing a very challenging course, if it falls down, then you really need to know how to pick it up. You need to be trained enough to pick it back up again. So at 200 kgs it can be a bit of a problem for those of you who are not very well built. But for me, deliberately at a position where it was a little precarious to put the bike down, I put it down, I picked it up, and I tested whether I was able to do it without any help. I was able to do it, and someone like me can manage this even in dangerous conditions. So from that aspect also, you're all clear. Now about the low end performance, the torque, the all important torque, I really believe that the old Himalayan had power coming in from 1500 RPM. This motorcycle delivers the power from about 2500, and there also you have to feather the clutch a little bit. So even if it's idling, and in second gear you can feather the clutch a little bit, and without using the throttle you can keep going on. The good part is it never stalls. So that was one part that I was really concerned about. The motorcycle does not stall, and that was one big win for the Himalayan. It never stalled, whether it was an uphill climb or whether I was going down. Even at very low RPMs, I was very easily able to feather the clutch and make sure that I kept the engine alive. And all in all, I never felt that this motorcycle was not true to what I expected of it. It didn't fall short on my expectations. Wherever I had to go, I could modulate the throttle and the clutch and get there. So the power and torque was not a problem. I never found it lacking like I did when I rode the Scrambler 400X. I really thought that at the low end, it left me wanting for more, and there was a chance of the motorcycle stalling if I did not use the throttle enough or the clutch enough. But no such problems on this motorcycle. And if you want to be going off-roading at slow speeds like how it should be, unlike what you see where people are going airborne, this motorcycle is fantastic. And some of the footage that you see here is testament to the capability of this motorcycle. So off-road, absolutely no problem, but it does get heated up, and if you are traveling in hot conditions, especially off the road where the engine is put to real test, you'll see the radiator coming in very quickly, and sometimes you have to be careful. The protection on the motorcycle is commendable, and these tank guards really do a very good job. And generally, if you topple the motorcycle, I really feel that you should not be worried about something really dangerous happening to it. There are a ton of accessories available. You should have probably some crash guards installed if you are too worried. But throughout my off-road adventure, I really felt that this was a built to last machine, and even if I dropped it, nothing is going to happen. But in order to be doubly sure, you can always have crash guards installed. I really think it's a very well designed, well built machine, and even if it falls, you should not have to stop your journey. You can really pick it up and start moving again. About the grip from the tires, I really believe that these tires are very good, at least in the dry conditions, because some of the sections which I was climbing, although they were dry, the gradient was pretty high for these tires to lose traction if they were not made of good rubber. Now I understand that Seat has collaborated with Royal Enfield to develop the compound and the pattern for these tires, and they really work in the dry conditions, at least on the road and off the road. Both the conditions, I had no problem whatsoever. About the handling aspect of this motorcycle on the road, it really bamboozled me, because it's supposed to be a motorcycle which is lighter up front. It has a big front wheel, and generally this kind of a setup leaves the front very light and a little wobbly. And the way this motorcycle handled corners was absolutely astounding. It really inspires a lot of confidence, and sometimes you come out of a corner with a sense of disbelief. It's really that good. So the twin spar chassis with the engine as a stressed member, the rear suspension, and even with the 200 mm travel up front and at the rear, the suspension can really take it. It's relatively firm and stiff. It's very well damped, and I really love how it behaves on the road and off it. So when you're leaning it, of course, it's not something which is meant to be a sporty motorcycle. It's not a super sport. So there are obviously going to be some limitations, but within that definition, this motorcycle really handles well. The braking has also been taken care of. Of course, it's not sharp or as sharp as the RC 390 or even the Duke 390, but I think that is also by design. And while there is a slight lack of bite, the brakes are sufficient, and even at speeds which are well above the triple digit mark, it's very easy to drop the anchors and bring the motorcycle to a halt without the sense of anxiety which was also clear and prominent while you were riding the older Himalayan. So the brakes have been fixed and you can really ride it hard without bothering about bringing it to a halt, because the chassis, the suspension and the brakes really come together really beautifully. The mirrors work really well and you have a very good sense of what's coming from behind. I really never had to bring down my elbows. The switch gear quality is very good, and what I really love about this motorcycle is this 4-inch TFT. Now initially when I tried to connect my OnePlus 10 Pro 5G with this, it gave me some trouble, but eventually it started working all right and it was such a bliss. It comes with 2 modes, an eco as well as a performance mode. And in the eco mode, what happens is the throttle response is blunted a little bit. You will get a little bit more fuel efficiency. In the power mode, you'll get better throttle response, and there is a very discernible difference in the 2 modes. You can choose whichever one you want. You can consider the eco mode as more of a rain mode, and that's more or less about it. You don't need to bother about it much. You can turn the rear ABS off in both the cases. There is no problem. Now in terms of performance, I think the one good part is that I saw the reviews of some of my colleagues from other publications, and there doesn't seem to be much of a difference in terms of the performance of this motorcycle on the Himalayas and at the sea level. So I checked the numbers and it seems like what they were telling me was pretty consistent, was what I have shared with you. So the motorcycle actually seems to be performing well in the Himalayas, which can only be a good thing. I cannot really replicate the seat of pant experience that they had, but the numbers that they shared were bang on, and specifically if I talk about the numbers, they are pretty much the same as to what I shared with you. Now in terms of the fuel efficiency, I think a realistic number with this motorcycle would be about 30 kmpl, and that should take its real world fuel efficiency too, and which should take its range to about 500 kilometers if you are not going the full Monty. If you are going at a very reasonable 110 kph, riding mostly on the highways, you can actually achieve 500 kilometers of range on this motorcycle, which really makes it a fantastic highway machine as well. I've already talked about the highway part of this motorcycle, and the tires are really fat at the rear 140 section. So the grip really in dry conditions is not a problem. Even on gravelly surfaces like this, where you have a lot of these round stones which kill traction, there was no problem. I rode up with my colleague who was riding Pillion, and typically any other motorcycle you'll have to make the Pillion get off. He had no problem whatsoever. He was sitting Pillion, and not just that, it was easy for me to handle, it was very comfortable for him as well. Another important aspect of having a Pillion rider or weight is it really affects the dynamic ability of a motorcycle. When I rode it with my Pillion rider, I hardly felt anything. So it's really sorted in the sense that it does not affect the suspension abilities of the motorcycles by much, the chassis abilities of the motorcycle by much, even when you have a Pillion. So that aspect has been taken care of, that has been factored in, and as a rider you won't really have to make too much of an extra effort for the Pillion that you're riding with. So in that sense, the stability of the motorcycle also is very commendable. Now a lot of people would ask me as to whether this motorcycle is for them. Well, if the budget is no problem, because the prices of the motorcycle are out now, 2.7ish to 2.84ish lakh rupees for the 3 variants. It's essentially the color difference. But if you are someone who wants a do-all motorcycle, someone who wants to have a motorcycle which is good for the highway, good for off-roading, something which is built sturdily, something which does not have too many of electronics in it, reasonable fuel efficiency, not too highly priced, you are reasonably well built, it's not a motorcycle for very skinny people. Most importantly, if you don't want a roadster or a purely road biased motorcycle, something which is meant exclusively for corner carving, I think this motorcycle can be for you. I really like the way this motorcycle looks, but it's not to everyone's taste. So I can understand that you don't like how it looks, and if you like something more flashy, something which is adorned by a fairing, something which is more sporty or has more tech bits on it, then this motorcycle is not for you. But as a versatile motorcycle which is very well built, I think it really cuts it for me personally. If you're a short rider, someone who is more oriented towards a lighter motorcycle, more road biased, wants the motorcycle to look prettier in a certain sense, then this motorcycle is probably not for you. Now, while there are a lot of goods about the motorcycle, there are some bads as well, and it is a heavy motorcycle, it's a big motorcycle, so not the easiest of the motorcycles to handle. Put it on the main stand and it, as you can see, it takes a little bit of an effort. It's definitely not something which can be put on the main stand by a very light rider. It misses out on electronics. It does not have traction control. It does not have cornering ABS or cornering traction control or many of the other bits that some of the motorcycles are getting. However, it does get one of the best navigation systems on the 4-inch TFT. It doesn't get a quick shifter, or some motorcycles in this segment are getting quick shifters, although it does get slipper and assist clutch, which is fantastic. I really believe that it really lends this motorcycle with usability in the real world conditions. It gets riding modes, which is a fantastic option. I thought initially that it would not come with that feature, but it does. The engine is a peach. Electronics is something that needs some sorting out, and especially since this is an off-roader, a common problem that I've seen with a lot of off-roading motorcycles is that when the motorcycle is tipped over and the fuel cutoff comes into play, a lot of sensors just, they go haywire, and you might get a lot of warning signs, warning signals on the instrument console, and that may need a little bit of tuning. My 2 pence about buying this motorcycle is, this is a very new product, so maybe it will take another iteration for Royal Enfield to completely iron out all the problems that it has, and waiting for a little bit will not be such a bad idea. So if you're really keen on this motorcycle, if I were you, I'll probably wait for the second batch. Just saying. Now, apart from that, switchgear has been shown to you by almost everyone here, and you get this M button here for the modes, and the joystick is here, which can be used to navigate through various different screens. Then you have the high beam, low beam, and the home screen button. All of this has been covered aplenty by my colleagues, and I don't want to be repeating all of that. I really think that for the price that it has been launched at, this motorcycle really presents itself as a do-all machine. It's not just an off-roader, unlike the older Himalayan, which really was pathetic on the road. It's a very, very capable on-the-road motorcycle as well, and that really is the beauty of this motorcycle. It's as capable on the road as it is off the road, and in that sense, Royal Enfield have really surpassed my expectations. I honestly did not expect it to be so dynamically able around the corners, so refined, so smooth, and so good at higher speeds. So a very, very versatile machine. You have to look at it as a machine which can do it all. Obviously, there would be a more road biased version which will be coming in some time, and there'll be a more extreme off-road version also which can be introduced at a later point in time. So all of those possibilities are also there, and for the price, I really think that it's totally worth it. Looks fantastic to me, and it's a much bigger machine than what it looks like in the pictures. You park it next to motorcycles like, say, the Hunter or the Classic or any other motorcycle from the Royal Enfield stable, and you'd see that it's really a monster. Especially when you look at it from here, the tank really looks monstrous. From the side, it really looks big, and it really has presence. So if you want a motorcycle that has presence, a fantastic machine to buy and own. So that was that, guys, my experience of the new Himalayan at sea level after having ridden it in Goa, and I really hope that I shared some insights with you which were previously not shared with you. Although a lot has been talked about this motorcycle, but as I mentioned at the time the rides were happening in the Himalayas also, that to call us or not to call us is the brand's call, but it's our duty and responsibility to report, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So a completely no specification kind of a seat of the pants experience from me, and I hope that it was of some use to you. Still, if you have some questions, if you have any specific questions, put them down in the comment section, and I'll be very happy to answer them for you. And if you like this long format detailed analysis from Motoroids, which we have always been known for, do hit the like button, subscribe to Motoroids, and this is your old friend Amit Changani signing off. Rev hard, rev free, and ride safe.